Hi, I'm political analyst and Citizen Voice President Gary Dietrich, here to help you make sense now out of Prop 36 coming up on your California November 2012 ballot. This one dealing with revising the three strikes law, a debate that's been going on in California, well, really almost since it passed many years ago. And this one is interesting because what it would do would, right now, 3 strikes, 2 serious felonies, a third one of any kind, and you could be committed to prison for life. This would change 3 strikes so that the last felony would have to be serious. Now, there's some little caveats that we'll get into, but to help us make sense out of this today, representing the Yes on 36 side, is Susan Champion. She's a fellow at the Stanford Law School 3 Strikes Project, and Scott Jones. He's the sheriff for Sacramento County. Welcome, both of you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, let's start with you. Why Prop 36?
Proposition 36 restores the original intent of the 3 strikes law by realigning or reconfiguring it such that it will ensure that those serious and violent repeat offenders go to prison for 25 to life. If you commit a 3rd serious or violent felony, you will go to prison for 25 to life. If you commit a non-serious, non-violent felony 3rd time, you'll get double the normal sentence that you would normally get for that crime. So by doing so, it's restoring voter intent, which was to have fairness and justice and to really focus on repeat serious and violent offenders.
Now, Scott, this has been an argument, that's gone on since 3 strikes was passed.
Sure.
So why, in your view, no on 36?
Well, first of all, as a premise, in 1994 when 3 strikes was passed, it has been working. The numbers don't lie. Violent crime has gone down in almost every category since 1994. You can point to a lot of different causative factors, but generally speaking, the economies arguably and unemployment are arguably at the worst they've been in some time. Education is the worst that it's been in some time, yet the violent crime still continues to go down. 3 strikes works. There are adequate safeguards in place to ensure that justice prevails in the application of 3 strikes, and we can pay attention to a often forgotten about segment in these arguments. That's the rights of the victims and future crime victims if we were to change this law.
Let me ask you then the next obvious question, and that is, if this passes, what would be the detriment? I mean, you're a law enforcement official, you're a county sheriff. Throughout the state, you hear a lot of debate about this. What would be the detriment of going to a serious felony for that 3rd strike?
A couple of things. Number one, it's important to realize that really only about 1 in 9 folks that are eligible for an indeterminate 25 to life sentence actually get it this time. And by the time someone gets a 3rd strike conviction for 25 to life, they usually have 5 prior strike convictions. So we have to get to a point in society where we realize that some people are not going to choose to rehabilitate themselves, and some people are not worthy of rehabilitation. Some people are going to choose a criminal lifestyle. By the Legislative Analyst's Office's own estimate, about 3,000 folks, because this would have retroactive application, 3,000 folks would be eligible for release. Okay, well, we know with a statistical certainty that 70% plus of those folks are going to recidivate and end up committing more crimes that would land them back in prison. That's 2,100 new crime victims. So whatever cost savings might be argued, what price do you put on 2,100 more serious and violent criminal victims? So that is one detriment, not to mention the consequential detriment to the local cities and counties in terms of financial impact.
Susan, let's go to this point of retroactivity that this proposition allows for, so that those who've already been convicted of 3 strikes under the current law could have their sentences reevaluated and, as Scott says, potentially reduced. So why is that an important component, and does it strike some people perhaps as being unfair? They got a sentence, now that could be changed. I want you to be able to address those issues because undoubtedly they're going to be on people's minds.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to remember that of those 3,000 that might be eligible for resentencing under the proposition, they would go before a court and the judge would have the opportunity to review their histories and to determine whether or not they would pose an unreasonable risk to public safety. That means that all sorts of purely discretionary things will be in the judge's hands to determine whether this person shows a likelihood of recidivating if they were to be released. The public safety element of Proposition 36 is very, very strong. Again, it focuses on repeat serious and violent offenders. And that's in line with a policy that's been essentially exercised by Republican District Attorney Steve Cooley in LA County for over a decade successfully. It's also supported by Jeff Rosen, the DA in Santa Clara County, supported by George Gascon, the DA in San Francisco County, Charlie Beck, Bill Bratton, both very strong law enforcement individuals, both also support Proposition 36 because they feel that the public safety element is satisfied by the terms of the proposition.
Okay, Scott, since Susan brought up the law enforcement element, let's just get to the nub of that right now. You're in law enforcement. Let's get your view, because she listed a whole bunch of individuals and their credentials. Who are the, I'm assuming there's a lot of folks in law enforcement on the other side of this thing.
There is, clearly. We see on a daily basis the effects of violent crimes. It's important to remember that by the time someone gets a third strike offense, a 25 to life sentence, they have committed and been convicted of 2 serious and violent felonies. And so we're not talking about folks, if you're a low-level offender, the pizza thief or the bread thief or the battery thief, if you're a battery and pizza thief all your life, you're never going to get 1 strike. These are folks that have already proven that they have committed 2 violent or serious felonies. And there's already many safeguards in place. By the very nature that folks that are eligible, only a fraction of those get 25 to life. So the things that this proposition advocates for, judicial discretion, for example, are already in place. They can reduce previous felonies to misdemeanors. They could also strike prior strikes in their court proceedings if it's seen just to do so. So the safeguards that this initiative speaks to are already in place. But again, there's not enough talking about and consideration of the victims, both past, for the folks that got convicted, and future, for the new crimes that would be committed should some of these folks get out.
And whenever you get into these kind of issues, cost savings always becomes a big part of the debate. So let's just take a moment for each of you to address that. Susan, let's start with you. In your view, I guess this is going to save overall the system money. And let's try, if we can, without getting too wonkish and too detailed, at both the local and state level. In your view, a net cost savings or not?
Oh, absolutely. The Legislative Analyst's Office has estimated that we could save between $70 and $90 million a year based on this reform. As you know, putting someone in prison for 25 to life, we're going to have a very, very aging prison population. As they age in prison, in the conditions of prison, they get all kinds of medical problems that taxpayers have to pay for. These are huge costs for Californians to bear. There are a number of financial savings that would result from putting some consistency in the law so that every county has a floor from which to use these very important tools.
Let me ask you real quick, those cost savings you cited, do those include what Scott alluded to earlier, which was the possibility that future crimes would be committed by these individuals?
Well, let's get to the point here. The point is really that we are going to be saving a huge amount of money that we're throwing into our prisons to send someone to prison for 25 to life for something like shoplifting, for something like a petty theft, which is what we do. As the sheriff mentioned, there are thousands of people that are currently serving these sentences, 25 to life. It's $40,000 a year for each of those minimum of 25 years, and after that for however many years beyond. So it can be $1 million decision for every single one of these offenders. Okay. And we're doing this for petty offenders.
Sheriff, you deal with cost stuff all the time. I know sheriffs throughout California right now are struggling with the release of state inmates already, pushed down to the local level. So, give us your ground level view on the cost issues related to this.
2 things. Number one, there will be a significant savings to the state, but just like we've seen in realignment, that's not the end of the inquiry. What happens is a lot of those costs get shoved down to the local level, in our case, counties. Those 3,000 folks, the retroactive folks that would have to be reassessed, that's going to increase the court burden locally. The new crimes that are committed. The Department of Justice's cost of crimes study in 1996 estimated that 3 strikes, and that's from that point, and then numbers extrapolated and adjusted for current dollars, has saved $54 billion just based on the crimes that did not occur. We know what the recidivism rate for someone that's in custody is, and that's 0. But we also know that they're going to commit a crime at the rate of 70% plus if and when they get out. Other thing to realize is most of these folks that get out and commit new crimes because of AB 109 realignment aren't going back to prison. They're going to stay right here in our local correctional facilities, then again adding cost to the local counties, and aren't going out on state parole as in the past. They're going to go out on this hybrid, much lower level of post-release community supervision with far fewer consequences. With diminishing law enforcement resources, we need greater consequences, not fewer consequences for offenders.
Okay. We've got to leave it there, but I want to give you each 30 seconds to wrap up so that people kind of can summarize in their own minds. Susan, why yes on Prop 36?
What I will say is that Proposition 36 will help reduce crowding in prisons so that we can have the truly serious and violent criminals in our prisons and deterred, not in our counties. We're talking about petty offenders who are getting sentences of 25 to life. Proposition 36 would make this consistent with policies that are in place in some of our largest, most diverse counties, for example, LA, Santa Clara, San Francisco. This would provide consistency so that offenders would know exactly what their punishment would be. If they commit a serious or violent third strike offense, they're going to prison for 25 to life. This is a sensible, conservative policy that is based on preserving public safety. And for those reasons, it prevents these unintended consequences.
Okay, Sheriff, 30 seconds. Why no?
Everyone that's in jail on a third strike right now on a 25 to life sentence is a serious and violent offender 2 times over before they have the opportunity to get there. If they want to rehabilitate themselves, they had the opportunity with ample warning. The 3-strike system right now is working. It has caused a reduction in the last 2 decades of violent crime in almost every category because of 3 strikes. It protects the public and the victims of crime, both past and future. And there are adequate safeguards in place right now to give judges and courts discretion of when to apply it and how to apply it fairly.
Okay. Listen, we thank you for your time today. We do help people make sense out of this because this has been a hot button issue for a long time. Susan Champion, fellow at the Stanford Law School 3 Strikes Project, and Scott Jones, Sheriff of Sacramento County. We appreciate your time. And friends, remember, this, like many issues on this November's ballot, it's going to affect you very personally in many ways. So take an opportunity to register to vote, and then on November 6th, make your voice heard. And here at citizenvoice.org, we just want to remind you, we're here to help.